Hello everyone and welcome back to another roll call. Today we're going to be making a dwarf ranger. That means our next one is also going to be a halfling paladin because those are the only ones left. As always, I randomized the name and gender, so we have Gardain Goldfinder. He is a level 3 Beastmaster Ranger. The Beastmaster subclass in the old player's handbook wasn't that great. It has improved a great deal in the current handbook, at least in my opinion. Uh, so we'll be going over that today. As always, we're starting at level 3. And to start off with, as a ranger, you get light armor training, medium armor training, and shields. Don't always have to use a shield, but it's +2 AC and it's free, so especially considering you're going to be doing your range mostly, you may not even bother with it. And then, of course, for weapons, as a ranger, it's all simple and all martial weapons. One thing I do imagine on this is I imagine very much the very traditional, like World of Warcraft dwarf hunter, where they have the firearm rather than the bow. That might depend a little bit on whether or not your DM wants firearms in their particular setting, so do consult them beforehand. But I would say if you don't want to go with a firearm, definitely go with a crossbow. That just feels like a very dwarfish thing to do. I kind of imagine this character as someone who is like a mountain guy, tracking people. Probably got the name Goldfinder because they were a prospector of some sort. So as such, we are given the background of the guide. Now that is going to give them a +2 in dexterity, a +1 in wisdom. We'll fill those out later. But it's also going to give us stealth and survival skills. So we'll mark those off on our sheet. Next, it's going to give us proficiency in cartographer's tools. May not seem useful, but these kind of tools get a lot more useful in the new player's handbook. In particular, this one is going to be useful for finding your way around. Between our background and our class, we have a total of 200 gold pieces to play with. And as always, we're going to do that going over the individual minutiae of weapons and tools that you get. Next thing we get is the feat, Magic Initiate Druid. And that's going to mean that we get 2 cantrips and 1 spell from the Druid spell list. I decided to go with Mending. I've always voiced my love of the spell Mending, easy way to fix things. Next, I went with Produce Flame. I did this mostly because it can be used as an attack cantrip. It doesn't have to be. But that's when where, I imagine this character, they're going to camp for the night, and he just uses the cantrip to, start his fire, rather than using flint or tinder. And then for the level 1 spell, we're going to go with Create or Destroy Water. Again, I imagine as someone who's a mountaineer, this would be a very useful one. You could just produce the water somewhere, fill your flask or your stores up, keep moving on the mountain. For languages, we're going to go with Common, and then of course Dwarvish, and then I decided to give him Giant, mostly because I imagine just on the mountain he might have encountered giants before. It's possible. They're not always, it's not like other settings where giants are necessarily bad by default. So he probably has communicated with some giants at a minimum. So our strength score, again, we are going with the standard array in the player's handbook. That's going to be 12 for a +1. Dexterity is going to be a 15, but we're going to add our +2 in it for 17, and that's going to give us a +3 modifier. Constitution, we're going to set that at 13, and that is going to be a +1 modifier. Next, we're going to go with intelligence. We're going to tank our intelligence. We're at 8. We're going to give this a -1 as a result. Wisdom is going to be 14, but then we're going to put that +1 in it from our background, making that 15. Again, this is going to be a nice solid +2, good for our starting stat. And then charisma is going to be our wash stat. It's a 10. We don't get any bonuses. We don't get any negatives to it. So those are our stats. As a result, HP at level 1 is going to be 10 plus Constitution, and then we have 2 levels that are each 6 plus Constitution. So that's 11, 7, and 7 for a total of 25 hit points. Not bad for a ranger, I think. Rangers obviously aren't going to be as beefy, but at the same time, they're going to be a little more beefier than, say, a wizard. Their passive perception is just going to be a flat 10. Let's see here. So now going into the class itself, our ranger saves are dexterity and strength. Again, strength we're probably not going to use as much, but dexterity is something that's probably going to become useful in combat. For skills, I went with perception. Get to choose 4 of these. Perception, nature, 3 of these, and animal handling. Now, I went with these because obviously Beastmaster Animal Handling just seems like the way to go. Survival and Perception very much in line with, the Ranger. And then I went with Nature, mostly because even though our intelligence score is tanked, I think it's a nice one for Rangers to have. And that's a good way of, we're not necessarily going to get any further benefits, but at the same time, we can at least use that proficiency bonus so that we end up with a +1 at this level rather than a -1. We'll get a +2 to proficiency, -1. We'll just +1 on the die. So it's a bonus, it's not as large of a bonus. Now for spells. Hunter's Mark. This is going to be the Ranger's bread and butter, basically allowing you to mark a target and do additional damage to it, as well as help. I don't know why I did that. As well as track it should it try and run away. Let's see here. Next, Hail of Thorns. This is one. A couple of these spells work a little differently because they're bonus actions, but the trick is that you can only cast them after you've done a successful ranged attack. So in this case, Hail of Thorns, you're going to shoot your gun, shoot your bow, shoot your crossbow, whatever you have. It's going to hit, and then you're going to use your bonus action to cast Hail of Thorns after that. But it only works if you hit the target. But still, it's a nice one to have. I think that's a very thematic. You shoot the bow, it changes into a bunch of bows, or a bunch of arrows. Ensnaring Strike. Again, same thing. You're going to have to hit with a weapon in order to... God, I don't know why I'm doing that today. So Ensnaring Strike. Basically, again, you hit a creature and it's essentially, it's ensnared. Next is Alarm. This is a bit of an odd one because you can basically dictate an area and basically say, okay, if certain things enter this area, then, you basically get to hear an alarm in your head that wakes you up, or that lets you know that someone has passed that area, or those specific things have passed that area. You do have to be careful because there are ways around alarm, but again, that's, between you and your DM, whether or not someone is able to sneak around your alarm. Just read the rules, make sure you know, because obviously, if you just say, oh, I want to have this alarm go off anytime someone enters it, then the second any party member enters it, the alarm's going to go off. At the same time, though, it's like you might not want that because they're allowed to be there and you don't want to hear unnecessary alarms. But again, just make sure you read up on that one. The next thing we get is 2 weapon masteries. Let's see, and those, for those, again, I imagine this with a ranged weapon, so I'm probably going to give it a rifle. So I'd probably choose a rifle, and then I would probably choose a melee weapon of some sort. But again, that's entirely up to you which ones you choose. Just make sure whichever ones you're choosing, that when you either spend your gold or do your starting equipment, it is something that you have the weapon for. And one thing I almost forgot to put on my little cheat sheet for this is I forgot to put in the dwarven stuff. So you get dark vision up to 120 feet. You get Dwarven Resilience, and that is just a resistance to poison damage and advantage on saving throws to make or avoid or end the poison condition. Another thing you get is Dwarven Toughness. Your hit point maximum increases by 1 and increases by 1 whenever you gain a level. So we actually have 28, because we get 1 at the start and then we leveled up twice. That's 3 points. So our HP is actually at 28. Next one is probably a little less useful. This one is called Stone Cutting. And essentially, as a bonus action, you gain Tremor Sense for a range of 60 feet for 10 minutes, but the caveat is you have to be on a stone surface or touching a stone surface to use this Tremor Sense. The stone can be natural or worked. And then you can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain them all on a long rest. So this one is a little niche, but I will say it does have uses, because how often are you going to be in ruins, or in a stone temple, or in a mountain, or in the Underdark? Probably more than you would think. Like, those are some pretty popular D&D destinations. If you're on a road, the road is paved with stones, you have Tremor Sense. If you're standing on any sort of foundation, for a building, you're going to have Tremor Sense. Unless you're in like a wood shack or something, you have quite a few places where you're going to have Tremor Sense. So that's a useful thing to have. Alright, so next we get Deft Explorer, and that is going to give us expertise on nature. So already, that's another reason why I went with nature for this one. So the expertise means that you double your proficiency bonus. So that's going to go from a 1 between these two, and then another 2, so that's actually going to be a +3 bonus that we have on nature. So again, not fantastic, but it's still really good. In fact, it'll be better than a lot of the other bonuses we have, say for our dexterity ones. The other thing we get from Deft Explorer is we get more languages, and I'm actually really happy about this, because this gives a chance to really show off languages. So you get 2 more languages. I decided to go with Orc, because again, depending on what your DM has, Orcs are not always going to be hostile. And even if they are hostile, a Dwarf might find it useful to know some insults in Orcish, just in case. And the other one I gave them is Draconic, because again, that's another one that I see cropping up on mountains a lot. So like, I'm trying to pick languages of like creatures that typically inhabit mountains. You're not always going to get goblins in mountains. You're not always going to get elves in mountains, but you're probably going to get a fair amount of giants, orcs, and dragons. Just things to give the character a more flavorful backstory. Next, we get to choose a fighting style mastery, and the dead ringer here is archery. Like, so many rangers take archery. You don't have to. You could easily make a melee ranger. I will probably go into that in a future video of these. But especially since I imagine this as a traditional range hunter, we're going to go with archery. Despite what the name says, it works with all ranged weapons, so you can use this on your guns and your crossbows too. So we're going to go with archery, so that's going to help us boost our ranged attack while our pet goes forward and mauls things. Now, here comes the fun part. Okay, so to give you an idea, I read this, and then all I put in my notes is just read from the book. Because it's a lot. Even though you only get one thing at level 3, and that's going to be your primal companion, there is a lot of rules as to how this works. So we're going to go ahead and we will put our primal companion here, and then I will read you all the rules. Isn't this fun, reading all the rules? Okay, so to give you an idea of the Beastmaster flavor for the subclass, a Beastmaster forms a mystical bond with a special animal, drawing on a primal magic and deep connection to the natural world. Primal Companion, that's the only thing you're getting at level 3. You magically summon a primal beast, which draws strength from your bond with nature. Choose its stat block: beast of the land, beast of the sea, beast of the sky. You also determine what kind of animal it is, choosing a kind that is appropriate from the stat block. Whatever beast you choose, it bears primal markings indicating its supernatural origin. The beast is friendly to you and your allies and obeys your commands. It vanishes if you die. The beast in combat. This is the important part. In combat, the beast acts during your turn. It can move and use its reaction on its own, but it only takes the dodge action unless you take a bonus action to command it to take an action in its stat block or some other action. You can also sacrifice one of your attacks when you take the attack action to command the beast to take the beast strike action. If you have the incapacitated condition, the beast acts on its own and isn't limited to the dodge action. Restoring or replacing the beast. If the beast has died within the last hour, you can take a magic action to touch it and expend a spell slot. The beast returns to life after 1 minute with all its hit points restored. When you finish a long rest, you can summon a different primal beast, which appears in an unoccupied space within 5 feet of you. You choose its stat block and appearance. If you already have a beast from this feature, the old one vanishes and the new one appears. So, again, a lot to keep in there. So the big takeaways is that if you don't use your bonus action to tell your beast to do something, all it's going to do is stand there and avoid getting hit, which is kind of antithetical to, having a beast. It's like if you have a beast you want to attack. If your beast is downed, you can use the spell slot to revive it, so that's not a huge deal. So it's not like you can, you're never going to like permanently lose your pet is the thing. So you're going to have a way to, resummon it. And even if you don't have the spell slots, you take a long rest, you resummon it then. So the big thing is that you have to, and here's the thing, and this is where a lot of DMs kind of get frustrated with these classes that have various summoning or pet attributes. If you play a Beastmaster, make absolutely sure that you take care of its stat block. Do not give your DM more work. Record its stat block, track its health, know its abilities, know its stats. You don't have to memorize it, but you should have like a little, even if you just write it down on a little scrap sheet of paper that says Primal Companion, that's all you got to do. So, for example, if you want to use your attack, if you want to forgo your attack and use the beast strike action, then you can go, okay, beast strike. This is what it does. This is what I roll. This is what I do. But on that note, that's the big thing with it, and this is kind of the criticism of it, is that Rangers have a lot they can do with their bonus action. For example, like those 2 spells that I mentioned, the Hail of Thorns and the Ensnaring Strike, they require you to take a bonus action after you've already taken your main action. And what I'm going to say is that's perfectly fine. I think those are 2 valid things you can do during combat, and I think your choice is really going to depend on where you are, what you're doing, what your beast is doing, where your beast is. Because if your beast is near something you want to attack, and you'll be able to do more damage with the attack, then and your sole goal is to, kill the thing, then by all means, have your animal attack, especially if you're a ranged boy like I plan this guy to be. He's going to be in the back, the beast is going to be in the front. Now that said, if, say, you want someone to not escape, and you want to use that ensnaring strike, definitely feel free to not take an attack with your animal, and to use the ensnaring strike. You're by no means bound to use your beast, you're by no means bound to use your bonus action for your spells or other actions. It's just another tool you can use. So on that note, again, it's not a perfect class, but it's still a pretty good one. Again, this is much improved over the previous one. Because the previous one, I think the big thing is that, a lot of the stat blocks in the book, like, it can, the action economy really kind of gets screwed up when you start adding more players on the field, and that's basically what the animal is. It's an additional player. So, if you're all fighting one big bad, and you're in a party of 4, let's say it's a bear, so you have your primal companion as a form bear, your bear gets to take its own action, that's 5 attacks to the boss's 1. And even with things like, legendary actions, legendary resistances, it's one of those things where it does get bogged down a lot. And players are already pretty OP, and especially in this new book. Like, one of the big concerns about the monster manual is that the monsters aren't going to be strong enough, because this book actually kind of buffs a lot of players in general. So hopefully they balance that out. But at the same time, it's like, I can definitely see why they made the Beast Companion take a bonus action to use. Whether or not that kind of measures up to other classes that don't have that restriction, but also have some sort of companion creature, that's kind of another story. Because at that point, you want to talk about, okay, well, how effective is this versus this? But yeah, so that's all there is to it. One other thing is our spellcasting modifier is Wisdom, and I think we've been through this before. Your spell attack bonus is going to be your spellcasting stat modifier plus your proficiency. In this case, that's going to be a 5. And in the case of the spell save DC, it's 8 plus that, so it's going to be 13. So if you cast a spell that requires a save, they have to make a 13 or more. And when you do a spell attack bonus, you're rolling d20, and that's where you're going to be adding to it. But yeah, Ranger, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Again, the Primal Companion mechanics can be a bit weighty to read, but if you're going to play Beastmaster, read these rules, know these rules. Know these rules so that your DM doesn't have to consult the book every time the Primal Companion tries to do something. But yeah, I kind of like the flavor of this one and the way this one turned out. So for the next one, it's going to be a Halfling Paladin. And here's the thing, is it used to be that Halfling Paladins, well, I mean Halfling Marshals in general, because the thing is that if you were a small or smaller creature, which Halflings are, then you had disadvantage for using any weapon with a heavy property. That is not the case anymore. And in fact, the only thing you need to wield certain martial weapons is a strength score of 13. Not a bonus, just a strength score. So this character would not be able to use those certain martial weapons, or at least those heavy martial weapons. They denote in the book whether or not you need a strength score for them. But it's one of those things where I could make a strength paladin, but you know what? Let's have fun with this last one since we're running out the book. Next week, I'm going to show you guys how to make a dexterity paladin. Trust me, it's actually a lot easier than you think it was. You're basically just switching your strength to dexterity. But you do want to, make sure you know certain things about like the way AC works with different armors and all that. So we'll get into that next time. But until then, this is Sakryo saying thank you for joining me on this latest episode of Roll Call. As always, do the various YouTube stuff like subscribe, click the bell icon, and keep doing what makes you awesome. Thank you very much, and goodbye.